Hi, everybody. This is Radio Free Mormon broadcasting behind enemy lines. Tonight's episode is Black Mormonism. It's Radio Free Mormon, episode 424. We're going to talk about the Black experience in the Mormon church. Now, obviously, that's a broad subject. We're only going to be able to talk about a very narrow slice of it, but it's a very important slice of it. And it has to do a lot with what was said at General Conference just a couple of weeks ago, October 2025 General Conference. And to discuss this important subject, I've invited a couple of friends of mine to join me on today's show. First off, there's Summur Rayn. How are you doing, Summur?
Hello. Doing fantastic.
Well, good. I'd love to see your smile. It makes me smile too. And here is Charles, also known as Black Priesthood. Charles,
That's
how you
right.
doing?
I'm doing good, thank you. Good morning, Summur. Good morning, RFM.
Morning.
Well, here we are, and what we're going to do is we're going to talk about this subject, right? By the way, we were just talking before the show started about how we're going to structure the show and what we're going to put emphasis on. We don't want to put a lot of emphasis on history so much as the present. And we're just going to talk about the history so quickly in order to get to the present because we've got some time constraints today and we want to focus on the main thing. So, having said that, Summur, can you give us a 3 to 5 minute description, background of yourself?
Sure. So my name is Summur Rayn, and I was raised in the church. My parents joined the church when I was 3. My dad played in the NFL, and he actually met a teammate who was LDS, Todd Christensen, when he was playing for the Raiders. He joined the church in '83. So interestingly enough, it was only a few years after the priesthood ban, or temple ban, as some people like to call it, was lifted. And I was raised in the church the whole time. Once they learned about it, they focused a lot on family, eternal families, and that bond, not so much on the priesthood ban or what the church's beliefs were before 1979. Uh, I now live in Utah. I've got 3 kiddos, and I no longer attend church. Oh, you're muted. I've
I'm
always
definitely
wanted
going
to
to
say
edit that.
that.
I'm going to edit that, though.
I've
Is it okay
always
if I edit?
wanted to say that.
You've always wanted to. Okay, I'll leave it in. I'll leave it in for you then. Everybody wants to say that, apparently. So
That's right.
this is your moment in the sun. Charles, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Sure. I was a convert to Mormonism. I grew up Catholic, very religious home. I mean, sometimes when you think of Catholicism, it's Christmas and Easter and that's it, right? But my family was actively practicing Catholic. Um, and other stuff that wasn't necessarily Catholic practices. We had nightly prayers in the home. If my parents were traveling, the very first question they would ask when they get home is, "Did you guys pray last night?" Right? One of the kiddos had to conduct prayer and so forth. So, but there was just something that was disconnected from spirituality, and I found that I was really needing that. And so I started looking around after high school, and that's when I came across Mormonism, and I talked to my parents, and they consented for me to take the discussions, and I did. And it wasn't so far removed from at least what we were practicing at home, which was fasting, Father's blessing, and so forth. And so it
Sorry,
felt
what were you
comfortable.
practicing? Charles, what were you practicing at home?
Yeah, so my father would give us Father's blessings.
Oh,
We can get into it at some point. Yeah.
as a Catholic, though, with no Mormon influence.
Yeah, as a Catholic, yeah. And we would fast if there was challenges within the family. We would fast, and my parents really tried to be generous in their interactions with other folks. So when I came across Mormonism, it just resonated. It felt like something that was close to home, and so I took the discussions and chose to be baptized. And that was 1984. 1985, I left home to go to what was then Rick's College.
Where
I
was
spent
home
2
again?
years.
Charles, where was home?
Nigeria.
Nigeria. And this is where you found the mission, or the missionaries found you?
I sought out the missionaries. And so I arrived at Rick's College in 85 to 87. I left on my mission from, you get in this pressure of you got to go on a mission. If you want to date anybody, you got, so I put in my papers and I left on my mission in 87 to 89. I served in Los Angeles. Within 3 months of arriving in LA.
I've got to tell you something though. Okay, you're almost getting to the point that's going to be later.
Okay.
So let's leave it at that, okay?
Okay, so we'll leave it there.
You become disaffected from the church. Around when did that happen?
So the moment I found out about the priesthood ban and the Cain curse doctrine, which was on my mission, it just became disenchanted. And from then on, I tried hanging on. I prayed, I fasted, I used all of the tools at my disposal that I knew. Doing this alone, I approached leadership to try and get some guidance and bearing and understanding of this issue. No help. This was a long journey alone. Anyway, so I struggled to try and hang on to the church all of that time. So finally, 2000, right after COVID, is just when I finally decided that it wasn't working for me. It had crushed my soul and destroyed my spirit, and I needed to step away from it.
That's 5 years ago.
Wow.
Yes.
How long was
all
it?
of that time.
When
I have to go back and do the math from.
When were you on your mission? Was that that was 35 years?
Yeah.
You were in this state of struggle for 35 years. Yeah, I can relate.
I tried to not do the math because, that talk about anger.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time angry.
Yeah.
Trying to make sense of it.
Well, you're the reason we're having the show today. I want you to know that, Charles.
Thank you. Thank you.
The reason
Thank you for a platform to talk about this. I appreciate it so much.
Well, it's because, I met you several years ago. You were on the show 5, 6 years ago. Not showing your face, I think.
Yeah.
But talking about your story. And we'll get to this here in a second. But one of the general authorities who spoke in this past general conference, Elder Johnson, said his story. And it immediately reminded me of you. And so I thought, I think we need to do a show on this. And you graciously accepted. And now you're to the point where you're not just Black Priesthood, you're also Charles, and you're showing your face. So this is wonderful.
Right. Yes.
All right. So what we're going to do here is we're going to give a very brief synopsis. Okay. We were going to make it a lengthier synopsis, but there's no way there's going to be time. The history of Blacks in the Mormon Church is very important. Most people who are watching this are already going to be familiar with it. And we're just going to touch on a few things here to bring us up to this most recent general conference. The brief sketch of Mormon history. There's all sorts of racist statements by Brigham Young, who really was the president of the church, who inaugurated the priesthood and temple ban against, men can hold the priesthood. It is a lay ministry. At least if you're 12 years old and you pass an interview, right? You can hold the priesthood, but not if you're Black. This is the way it was from 1852 to 1978 when the ban was lifted by President Spencer W. Kimball. So that's 126 years. It had two components. Black men could not hold the priesthood. Black women could not hold the priesthood either, but white women can't hold the priesthood, right? So Black men could not hold the priesthood for 126 years. And that also impacted the ability of both Black men and Black women to go to the temple, because that's all about priesthood ordinances in the temple. And therefore, my understanding is that for 126 years, Black men and Black women were not admitted into the temple.
That's
they could not go. Is that right, Summur?
Yeah, that's my understanding as well.
Yeah. There was nothing that they could do to go in there. There was nothing in there that they could do. They were not permitted inside the temple for 126 years, which means that all the ordinances of exaltation, what most people think of as salvation outside the LDS church, but in other words, being able to live with Jesus and God again, and your family, were denied Black people under this vague promise that sometime in the eternities that would be rectified when God got around to it. Okay, so he said a lot of things. He said, if a white man had children with a black woman, it would bring a curse on a man and all of his children that were produced as a result of the union. And
Yep.
I have heard these quotes so many times. You both heard these quotes so many times. People out there may think, excuse me, people out there may think if they haven't heard these quotes before, how can you just read through these quotes and not be mortified by them? Well, I kind of got mortified by them the first 100 times. I read them. Now I know that they exist, but they're still pretty bad. And something that struck me was the second part of this same quote, which I was not as familiar with, which said, and if someone were to kill the man, woman, and any children, any children of such a union of a black man and a white woman, this is Brigham Young talking, that it would be a blessing to them. It would be a blessing to them to be killed by you. It would do a great deal towards atoning for their sins. So we not only get the priesthood ban there, we also get blood atonement in one quote from Brigham Young. Well, I'm not going to be able to have time to do this with every quote, but I want to get your takes on it, Summur and Charles. Summur first.
So I never knew of this quote until Matthew Harris's book, Second Class Saints. That's when I first heard of it. I had no clue. Um, my children are a union of me, a black woman, and my husband, who is a white man. And so this was very hard for me to learn. And I only heard of this quote maybe 8 months ago. I've heard of racism in the church and all of that, but my parents converted uh, on the East Coast. So it was a different flavor of Mormonism, if you will. So this itself is very tough to read, to know not only wishing death on myself and a white man, but also my children. I don't understand how you can reconcile that at all. And I don't think you can reconcile it, which is why they just kind of bury it in history now.
Yeah. Charles?
Yeah. This is, this is something that I was not aware of when I converted to the church, right? None of this history. In fact, when I was struggling through this issue, there was no resources available. I had to step into, after my mission, I went into the Institute library, and that's when I started pulling out. You had to actually go look at physical books, the Journal of Discourses. And that is when I started discovering these quotes. The fact that it was considered sin, Brigham Young considered this marriage, this union, almost eternal sin. If you think about, atoning, if you think about asking for forgiveness for earthly, if I offend somebody and I ask for forgiveness, that's an earthly thing. He is discussing here that it would do a great deal towards atoning for the sin, just the sin of this union, of these children being produced out of this marriage, is such an eternal displeasure to God that the only way to atone for it is for them to be, unalived. It is very difficult to read this, and the fact that no apology has been offered for this kind of prophetic statements. In my mind, what does it say? Whether it is by my voice or the voice of my servant, it is the same, right? Prophetic statement. This is what Brigham Young said. So it is very painful.
Let's go ahead. I'm going to just click through these because Brigham Young and other leaders of the church said very painful things on a number of different occasions. And here is Brigham Young talking about the mark of Cain. Here he is talking about if a white man who belongs to the chosen seed, that's the chosen seed of whiteness, by the way, mixes his blood with the seed of Cain, that's black. The penalty under the law of God is death on the spot. This will always be so.
Yes.
Is it that way today? I don't think it's that way today.
I don't think it's that way today.
Okay.
And just for those that don't know, blood atonement is a practice that the belief was that there are sins that are so irredeemable that you had to, that Jesus sacrifice didn't even atone for them. So that's what we are saying is this sin is so bad that Jesus's atonement didn't cover it. And so they need to be killed in a certain manner on earth for it to be counted as atoned for. So it's even worse than just death on the spot. It's saying that this is something that Christ himself couldn't even atone for.
That's right.
Okay, that's a fascinating point that had not occurred to me before, Summur. And Charles said a fascinating point that had not occurred to me before either, which is when you look at what Brigham Young says on these, it is the old Doctrine and Covenants, section 1, verse 37 and 38, is it? Whether
Yeah.
by mine own voice or by the voice of my servants, it is the same. Wow. Okay. Well, I'm sorry we have to go through these so quickly, but I know we have a lot of other good stuff to get to. It continues with John Taylor, who said, because it was necessary that the devil should have a representation upon the earth as well as God, that's why Black people are here.
Yep.
Right.
Third prophet of the church.
Right.
Thank you. And we know who this lady is.
Yeah.
Summur, who is this?
Jane Manning Smith.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, Jane Manning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was expecting James, but I guess it's Smith. Is she a Smith? Or is she's
sealed
not
to
married
Smith.
to him, right? She's a servant forever.
Yeah.
She had
That's
wanted to
so
be-
interesting because I know her as Jane Manning James, but my initial thought was Smith because that is how the church refers to her. But the reason why she has a Smith is because she was sealed to the attorneys to Joseph Smith as a servant. So that's it was a Freudian slip there. That's really crazy that I did that. And someone can check this, but from what I understand, she wasn't even allowed in the temple for the sealing to be sealed as a servant. They had a white woman go in as her proxy to seal her as a servant to Joseph Smith.
This is how strict the temple ban was on Black people. That Jane Manning James, just incredibly faithful. There's no question about her faithfulness or her loyalty to the church or her obedience. Okay, so it's not an issue of that at all. But not only could she not go into the temple to perform an ordinance or have an ordinance performed upon her, she couldn't even go into the temple to watch somebody else perform an ordinance, which was standing in for her by proxy to be sealed as a servant to Joseph Smith. Joseph Smith wasn't there. There was a proxy for him as well.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. So, as I've reflected on just this Cain curse doctrine, it occurs to me that the intention, to my mind, is Black people were not good enough in the pre-existence. They're not good enough in the present existence, and they're not going to be good enough in the post-existence if following this sealing of Jane Manning James in servitor or as a slave to Joseph Smith, it really demonstrates how they viewed Black people. But for those of us that went through the temple, I've just been trying to think about what does that prayer sound like, that sealing prayer, sealing Jane Manning James to Joseph Smith as a slave. Who devised that prayer? Like, who came up with the prayer that is pronounced upon her in that ritual, right? And so when I think about that, that's probably something that perhaps either had been devised and practiced or had to be invented in that moment for her to be sealed as a slave to Joseph Smith. So it is quite disturbing that there was no avenue, no path for her to be considered human enough to be not only allowed in the temple while this was being done, but even as a child of God, equal standing before God.
Yeah, it's interesting. It may have been Joseph F. Smith who was involved in that, but it is interesting that they had enough revelation from God to come up with this new prayer or new ordinance, but not enough to lift the ban.
Right.
And can I just point out too, I never read that first quote before these slides, but She was the daughter of a freed slave, and still had to be sealed as a servant/slave in the eternities. I don't even know what that would feel like, to be the daughter of a freed slave. Her father was a slave, was freed, so she's now a free woman, but spiritually she had to have that designation again. So that, I don't know, that just stood out to me.
Does it make it any better that she's called a servitor instead of a slave?
I mean, probably from what my understanding is a servitor in that time was synonymous, but and I don't know, maybe that's what the prayer that they were told should say servitor instead of slave.
Oh, I imagine. Yeah.
God
I was
said.
being
I
a
think
bit
they just
facetious. I think in the New Testament, at least, when it says servant, it can basically be read as slave.
Yeah.
it could be a modern invention to sanitize. I would be curious to see the prayer. I'm sure as LDS people are encouraged to keep record in all things, that prayer exists someplace. And that's probably where we would find what was pronounced.
I know
think
that
this
her
might
patriarchal
be a different word.
blessing is documented. Her
Mm.
patriarchal blessing is documented, and she was from Cain, the lineage of Cain,
Wow.
in her patriarchal
Yeah.
blessing. So, yeah, there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
I was going to check this out and see if we could come up with something really quick. Let's see. During the 1894 ceremony where Jane Manning James was sealed as a servitor to Joseph Smith, the following was declared, quote, "By the authority given me of the Lord, I pronounce you Jane James, a servitor to the prophet Joseph Smith and to his household for all eternity, in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Ghost." That's not everything, but I think that gives the gist.
Okay.
This family.
And I say it's not everything because what I'm reading has some ellipses in it.
Yeah.
Through all eternity. Through all eternity. Can you imagine that? She has no redemption, no path to full humanity as a daughter of God. She couldn't even qualify as a full daughter of God to become. Yeah, it is
a lot.
A
lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
It is. Let me just continue on. Of course, there's J. Reuben Clark. He said a number of things. I'm just going to skip over these. I apologize. This one, of course, being especially important. Oh, this is 1947. This one is the one that's especially important in 1949 because that's where a first presidency statement was issued, declaring that the doctrine, or the teaching that Black men could not hold the priesthood and that Black people could not go to the temple was not just a policy, it was doctrine.
No matter what they say today.
I'm sorry, what is it, Summur?
No matter what they say today. It was
no matter what they say.
Not
absolutely. They try and say it was policy so we could change it. Because doctrine in the Mormon church, you can't change ever. Policy, you can. Therefore, if a doctrine ever changes, it retroactively becomes a policy.
Yeah.
But standing in the way of this is this 1949 First Presidency Statement, which states expressly the attitude of the church with reference to the Negroes remains as it has always stood. It is not a matter of the declaration of a policy, but of direct commandment from the Lord, on which is founded the doctrine of the church from the days of its organization. It could not be much clearer.
That's right.
So this was a doctrine. It was very firmly ground into Mormonism, and it came to be believed among the leadership of the church that even though no revelation had been claimed to institute the ban, it became believed that it had been in place so long that it would take a revelation to remove it. And Spencer W. Kimball was finally able to do that in 1978. Same year I joined the church, same month I joined the church.
Wow.
Although the missionaries didn't teach me about it. But, I'm not as mad about that as I might be if I were Black.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they teach the same discussions no matter what. Now, there's a few things here about from, who was it? Boyd K. Packer, talking about doctrine cannot be changed.
Right.
and Tom Perry saying the same thing. And then we've got a quote from Alvin Dyer, where he is emphasizing the uniquely Mormon twist on the curse of Cain doctrine. Because the curse of Cain doctrine, very common among Protestants. I don't know about Catholics, but basically in early America and other places, the curse of Cain was the idea that Black people had a curse upon them, and it was used to justify the enslavement of them and give it a biblical basis. See, it's righteous to do this. Mormonism came along, and they adopted that as well from Protestantism, the curse of Cain doctrine, but then they added their own special twist because Mormonism has this somewhat unique belief in a premortal existence. So if where we go after this life is predicated on what we do in this life, then it became irresistible for Mormons to believe that what happens to us in this life is predicated upon what we did in the previous life. Right. So now, arguing from the conclusion, in case it's not obvious what we're doing, arguing from the conclusion that Black men cannot hold the priesthood, that there's this ban in place, right? Temple and priesthood ban. Well, that means you must have done something bad in the premortal life. Otherwise, that wouldn't be just of God.
Right.
Yep.
And God is a fair God, right?
Yes. So the argument in Mormonism came down to not whether this is true, but whether, believe it or not, this is the argument. I think you probably know this. The argument came down to whether what the spirits in the premortal world that came down into the Black race, in other words, the Black spirits, if I can just put it briefly like that, the Black spirits in premortality, all right, they either sat on the fence and were not valiant in their testimony during the war in heaven, or they did something else that was wrong. They didn't sit on the fence, but they did something else that was wrong that we just don't know what it was, but it must have been pretty bad because look, they can't have the priesthood. They can't go to the temple. And Joseph Fielding Smith was in favor of the latter idea as opposed to other, because Joseph Fielding Smith said, no, there were no fence sitters in heaven. They just did something really bad. We don't know what it was. So that's what the argument came to be, not whether this ban was proper or not. There were some who argued about that. They were very, very few. They grew in number as time went by, but most people like Elder Oaks just went along with what the prophet said because he's the prophet and you got to follow the prophet.
Right.
Which hopefully is going to bring us up to this most recent. Oh, well, this is our prophet. Here's President Oaks.
Yes.
And his comment, I don't know that it's possible to distinguish between policy and doctrine in a church that believes in continuing revelation and sustains its leader as a prophet. By the way, as an axiom, I think that's correct.
Yes.
Right.
From within Mormonism, I think that's correct because I think what he's saying is, you know, there's a lot of people talking about there's a difference between a policy and a doctrine, right? And a lot hinging on it. He's saying, what is the difference between a policy and a doctrine? If you're getting revelation from God for your policies, then how are the policies not doctrine as well?
Right.
And that's what he believes. And that's what a lot of people believe. That's what Boyd K. Packer taught as well. Everything that happens in the church, policy, whatever it is doctrine that's given by God to the leaders, then funneled down to the members. Now, hopefully this is going to bring us, yes, to the Black Speaker General Conference. We're almost at half an hour in. So good. I think we're doing, when is it? Do you have to leave again, Summur?
Oh, another hour and a half.
Okay, let's get going because there's a lot of good stuff to cover. Black Speakers in General Conference, October 2025. I watched every session live, as you probably know, but I noticed a couple of things about the speakers. The first thing I noticed was there seemed to be quite a few Black speakers, which was not a bad thing at all. And someone had done a meme on this. I think Rebecca Biblioteca shipped this to me. She may have created it. But here we have 5 Black people featured in General Conference, one in each session, by the way, as if it were planned.
Yeah.
Tracy Browning, who's a general primary counselor, I think, Saturday morning session. Kevin G. Brown, Saturday afternoon session. Both of those spoke. Edward Dubé, Saturday evening, but he was a prayer, but he was present. It's Saturday evening, and that was very short, just about an hour and 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Then Sunday morning, Peter Johnson will feature him. Peter Johnson spoke Sunday morning, and then in the afternoon of Sunday, John D. Amos spoke. So I think this is a record.
I believe so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think we've
Um,
ever had this ever, to my knowledge, at least in all my time in the church.
What are your thoughts about that? Is this a good thing or a bad thing, or is it both? We'll start with Charles.
I think it is a good thing. Anytime there's potential visibility for a group that has been sort of not really recognized in the church, especially such as have gone through so much doctrinally in the church, I think it is a good thing. I do question why now. The scripture comes to mind that for he that is compelled in all things is a slothful servant. It seems like the church is finally pushed into doing this, right? To feature so many Black speakers at General Conference. On one hand, I wonder if this is just not to curry favor among the Black population, since the church has grown so much in Africa. But it just seems like if they were considered equally children of God, that this should have happened a long time ago. But better late than never. It is good.
Very good. Summur?
Yeah, I feel the same. I feel like it's a double-edged sword. I think those of us that have friends and family and people that we love that are still in the church, we want to see progress always. But then the question is this progress? Or as Charles mentioned, the church is growing exponentially in Africa. These people are going to be looking at conference, and it's going to be odd if they're looking around and seeing in their own wards, their own leadership locally, Black members, but not seeing that in Salt Lake. It will be very odd. And so I think that everything that the church does, I do believe, is discussed. It is calculated. It is this the right time? So is it a good thing? It's that's a hard answer for me to say if it's good or bad. I never think it is good to show something as representation that is not true representation. So it's a difficult thing to say that it's good, but I do appreciate whenever I see anyone Black or a person of color speaking in conference, because it's a nice thing to see as well. So it's I don't think I answered that question. It's hard.
Yeah. I think that if we're to take Elder Oaks at his word, this is what the conference looked like before President Nelson passed away. In other words, it's not something that Elder Oaks came in and said, okay, well, let's change it up and let's add some more people.
Yeah.
Does that make sense, Summer?
That makes sense. Yeah. And I do think that I don't think that this necessarily was a President Oaks call, because the church in Africa is growing. So I could see that this was a call on all fronts before President Nelson passed. I don't think it was, an audible within the past week of conference. But I also don't know if it was Heavenly Father that said, okay, it's time now to have these speakers speak. I think that it is something that was discussed, just like the priesthood ban being lifted was discussed. I don't know
Very
if that's
good.
possible, but
I'm so far away from thinking that God was involved in any of this that I appreciate you bringing up that perspective that I'd overlooked.
It's a revelation.
So we'll look at each of these individually. There was the Eternal Gift of Testimony by Elder Kevin G. Brown, which I thought was a very passionate talk.
yes.
It was very well delivered. And so I thought this was one of the best talks I'd heard in General Conference. Then there was Elder Peter M. Johnson, The Power of Ministering to the One. We'll play a clip from his talk and talk about that. Sister Tracy Y. Browning, Tune Your Heart to Jesus Christ, the Sacred Gift of Primary Music. Elder John D. Amos. When I heard him, I said, no, this is the best talk I've ever heard in General Conference. It took me a day to change my mind. This was the best one. Elder John D. Amos, fantastic talk. We're not going to talk about what he had to say either. We're going to focus on two talks, one by Elder Johnson and another by Elder Godoy, who's not Black, but devoted his talk exclusively to the situation of the church in Africa because he's in the presidency, the area presidency over there. Now, let's see here. But before we get to that, we're going to talk about the very sensitive subject of interracial marriages because I don't know if it's that sensitive anymore. It sure used to be, especially in Mormonism. It still is in some circles in Mormonism. The idea of interracial marriages was, of course, discouraged by Brigham Young. I think we read a quote of his on that subject where he very mildly discouraged interracial marriage,
Very
likening it to what the unpardonable sin, right? It can only be blood atoned. Actually, he didn't even say that would forgive you. I think he said that would go a ways toward forgiving you.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow. But this is the history of it. And we're going to talk about this mainly because of Charles. Okay. Summur, you're certainly welcome to weigh in. I just know a little bit more about Charles' background, and this made me think of him. Okay. We know that let me just go through this really quickly. Okay. This is the history of the church and interracial marriage. Many church publications since the 1978 lifting of the Black Temple and Priesthood ban have contained statements discouraging interracial marriage. In the same June 1978 issue, announcing that Black members were now eligible for temple ordinances, missionary service, and priesthood ordination. So in other words, the same newspaper that says the ban is lifted, it also emphasized no interracial marriage. It's obvious there was a political trade-off that went along with that to get those votes on the part of Spencer Kimball. The official church newspaper also printed the article, quote, interracial marriage discouraged, end of quote. The same day of the change, a church spokesperson stated, interracial marriages generally have been discouraged in the past. That remains our position. And that, quote, the church does not prohibit interracial marriages, but it does discourage them. It discourages them highly. And when a prophet discourages something in the Mormon church, if you're a faithful Mormon, you obey.
That's right.
Church, that's the way it goes. That's Mormonism.
Yeah.
Church leaders' discouragement of marriage between those of different ethnicities continued being taught to youth during church Sunday meetings until 2013. That's 12 years ago. That's into the 21st century.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
When the use of the 1996 version of the Sunday school textbook for adolescent boys was discontinued. So it was in the 1996 version, which they kept using until 2013 for the adolescent boys Sunday school manual. The manual had used, this is the part in it, the manual had used a 1976 quote from past church president Kimball, which read, we recommend that people marry those who are of the same racial background generally. The quote remains in the still used Institute manual titled Eternal Marriage. It's a student manual, okay? That's not necessarily true. I think that it was true when this was written. I don't think it's still there, but you can still see clues of where it was in that manual. Oh, here they are, because I went to find it. I wanted to find out where it was in the manual so I could put it up on the stage. What you don't find is the quote. What you find is the clues that it used to be there in the glossary, whatever it is, the index at the end. Culture and race inmate selection. Well, that sounds like where they would have that statement, right? Mm-hmm. And it's on page 168 and 188. But when you go there, here's what you find. You find this quote from President Spencer W. Kimball, where it says the difficulties and hazards of marriage are greatly increased where backgrounds are different. So it just says backgrounds are different, a generic term. But what this is from shows that the context in which he was originally speaking is interracial marriage. Summur, could you read this first paragraph, and maybe I can get Charles to read the next one and so on. But the highlighted part is the part that still remains in the manual. the difficulties and hazards. See, that's that same sentence there.
Yep. The interrace marriage problem is not one of inferiority or superiority. It may be that your son is better educated, it may be superior in his culture, and yet it may be, on the other hand, that she is superior to him. It is a matter of backgrounds. The difficulties and hazards of marriage are greatly increased where backgrounds are different.
Can you read this next one, Charles?
Sure. When one considers marriage, it should be an unselfish thing. But there is not much selflessness when two people of different races plan marriage. They must be thinking selfishly of themselves. They certainly are not considering the problems that will beset each other and that will beset their children.
If your son thinks he loves this girl, he would not want to inflict upon her loneliness and unhappiness. And if he thinks that his affection for her will solve all her problems, he should do some more mature thinking. Can you take the last paragraph, Summur?
We are unanimous, all of the brethren, in feeling and recommending that Indians marry Indians, and Mexicans marry Mexicans, the Chinese marry Chinese, and the Japanese marry Japanese, that the Caucasians marry the Caucasians, and the Arabs marry Arabs.
So that's from black is missing. Sorry.
I know, isn't that funny? The whole reason they're talking about this is because of the blacks, right?
Right.
It's not about the Mexicans. It's not about the Indians. It's not about the Chinese, okay? It's not about the Japanese. It's not about the Caucasians, except insofar as we don't want them marrying black people, right?
Right.
So they'll talk about every nationality or race or ethnicity under the sun except the one that they really mean.
Right.
And I would like to point out that historically, this is what was culturally accepted at the time, right? Oh, it will be so difficult. You know, make sure you stay with your race. Make sure. The problem, I think, is we're not talking about culturally. These are supposed to be people speaking directly from God. And so God is the one that is saying that this is the recommendation, stick with your own. And that's a problem because God should not be changing.
I will tell you, I think that, first off, I know that I cannot judge another person's heart. And I certainly can't judge Spencer Kimball's heart. And he's the guy who's responsible for lifting the priesthood and temple ban. So all I'm going to say is that this rationale for excusing racism, I think, is very common.
Yeah.
In other words, people who are racist don't usually say, I feel this way because I'm a racist. There's an alternative way, a good way, something that sounds good, that's beneficent, right? Like we're thinking of the kids, and we're thinking of the wife or the spouse and how bad that's going to be for them. It's going to be so tough for you. The kids are going to be made fun of at school. What kind of life is that? What are you doing to your kids? Marry within your race.
Yes.
So I don't know about President Kimball. All I can say with surety is that there are at least some who have used this justification to hide their racism, and not because that's what they really thought was best for people. Besides, really, I don't know. What business is it of theirs?
I mean, that's it. That's the thing. I even on the East Coast, my sister encountered this where she really liked a boy, and that boy's mother said to her in 6th grade, "What about your children? You know, think of your children."
So your sister likes a white boy in 6th grade?
Yeah.
And the white boy's mother says, "What?" To
Yeah.
6th
And the
grader?
white
What about
boy
your children?
liked my sister because she's cute.
Yeah.
And the mother said, "What about your children? You know, you have to think about your children." 6th grade. And I did not, and this was an LDS mother on the East Coast, and I had no idea until now that that's what this thought was, that's what the excuse was within the church for decades. I had no idea, and I don't even know if she realized that this is just something she'd heard over and over and over again. And it sounds nice, right? It sounds nice. You should stick within your own culture, your own socio-economic status. I mean, it sounds nice, but it is racist. that's what it is.
Yeah, marriage is hard enough, so you're better off marrying someone that you don't really love who's of your own race.
Exactly. Yep.
I mean, it does beg the question, given this position, right? That would imply that marriages that are within the same socioeconomic status, within the same race, would be highly successful.
Yes.
Temple marriages would be highly successful, right? But is that the case? I don't think so. I mean,
Right.
just even in the very recent past, seeing all of the dysfunctional marriages, the Valos and the Daybells, and I mean, those were all within the same demographic, right?
Yeah.
but it's highly dysfunctional marriages, and I think there's a lot of marriages in the church that are struggling. We put on this mask of Mormonism, pretending that everything is perfect within families, but there is a lot of challenges and suffering in the church, in marriages, that are not only to show up on Sunday and look great, but behind closed doors is highly dysfunctional.
Yeah.
Very good. Oh, President Russell M. Nelson, he even hints at it. Now, this was in 1995, and he's passed away now, so I guess we don't care about anything he said, according to Mormon doctrine, since now he's a dead prophet.
Right. Dead prophet.
But he did say, he put it this way: the probabilities of a successful marriage are known to be much greater if both the husband and wife are united in their religion, language, culture, and ethnic background. So he didn't say the word race. Do you think that's what he meant? I kind of do.
That's what he meant.
We know.
That's what he meant.
Yeah.
It's very interesting because religion, language, culture is so different than race. So it's interesting. It's interesting that he puts ethnic background in with religion. Well, yeah, if you both speak the same religion, you have a higher probability of a successful marriage, right? If you speak the same language, if you come from the same culture, but ethnic background, that's just skin, so it's just very interesting that they couple that together. And I think that's what the main focus is on that ethnic background.
Yeah, they've come to the point in 1995 where they're still trying to teach the same thing without being caught off first base doing it. Okay. Now, once again, I said this is a sensitive subject. We're bringing this up for a reason, okay? But there are a number of people who spoke in General Conference, some who didn't. Like Ahmad Corbett did not speak in General Conference, but he did speak in the last General Conference, I think, or maybe it was some other special thing that he did, which I did a commentary on. But this is Elder Kevin G. Brown and his wife, Nadine Lazan Carter. And here's Elder John D. Amos, my new favorite speaker among the brethren. Elder John D. Amos and Michelle E. Amos. But here we have Elder Peter M. Johnson and Stephanie Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, for the people who are listening to the audio, these first two people are marrying within their race. In other words, they are doing what it was that they were taught to do. I mean, who knows? Maybe they fell in love and they just happen to be the same race. But basically, they're following prophetic counsel that we've just gone over, and that's why we went over it. So they're following the prophetic counsel. Elder John D. Amos and his wife are following the prophetic counsel. But then we find a surprising number of officers and GAs in the church who did not follow prophetic counsel and yet got promoted to leadership positions. And Elder Peter M. Johnson and Stephanie Johnson is one example of a couple like that. There's Elder Ahmad S. Corbett and Jane Corbett, which is another example of a couple like that who did not follow prophetic counsel. And I think they're old enough that we figure when they're married, yeah, that's what they were saying.
Right.
And Tracy Y. Browning and Brother Brady Browning did not follow prophetic counsel. And as I think it was Charles was pointing out right before the show started, maybe it was Summur, if you look at what she did, she not only married a white man, she also pursued a career, which was, she's like, she did two things. that were against prophetic counsel. She also studied at St. John's University. I guess that's okay as long as she drops out as soon as she, gets married. But
Has kids.
yeah, she has worked in financial services for 15 years. Who is this woman? And is now an account services director in the church's publishing services department. And she's also volunteered with various community and civic organizations. So this is a woman who has defied prophetic counsel on two fronts and yet risen to a very high position of leadership in the LDS church. Now, there's a reason I bring this up. And I think that, hang on, let me take this off the stage, okay? And the reason is because of something that happened. It was 5 or 6 years ago, the first time I was interviewing you, Charles. And you had talked about how difficult it was to find Black Mormon women.
Right.
It's a small dating pool out there.
That's right.
And when you got a small dating pool, you're looking for someone that you're going to be compatible with, unless you're just going to do something crazy and jump into a marriage with someone because they're the same religion as you, like some prophets have told us to do, including President Kimball. But if you're going to find someone compatible, the more people in the dating pool, the more likely it is, right? As a matter of statistics.
Right.
What I had understood you to say on our first interview, Charles, was that made it very difficult for you.
Yeah.
And I understood why it would make it difficult for you. What I did not understand until I got home and was talking to you on the phone was that you meant, yeah, it was difficult for you. It was difficult for you to the point where, because you followed prophetic counsel, you never got married.
That's right.
You never had a family.
Right.
Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So this is a difficult subject for me. It is one of the biggest regret in my life. The consequences of my decision to join the Mormon Church has robbed me of so much. Coming from a family of 7 children, 6 other siblings, to not be married and have a family of my own has been devastating. But this is the consequence of, I suppose I could have gone out and married outside of my race, but at every instance, both at Ricks College and at Utah State University, bishops highly discouraged whenever I was dating. This was so bad that while at Utah State, I remember dating a non-member girl just so that I can try and find a mate. And as you know, in college towns, especially in Mormon college, LDS college towns, you have roommates. Just it's a way to keep your cost of living down. And so one of my roommates, a white guy, went and reported me to the bishop for dating outside church membership, for dating a non-member.
Wow.
And this was devastating because I'm thinking, well, so where do I belong? Where am I supposed to go to find somebody to date? It feels like there's this added tax, so to speak, right? Because there's not critical mass, especially if you're going to school in Utah and living in Utah. There's not a critical mass population of prospective spouses that you can, interest that you can. And so it was always this thing where, a bishop would find there's a Black girl in Oakland. Oh yeah, you got to move to Oakland. Or there's one in Hyde Park, London, which I think at that time had quite a sizable church membership population. Well, you have to move to London to find a mate. Like, I should have to work this hard just to find a spouse, right? When any average white person comes back from a mission, they go to BYU and they can easily find a spouse. I have to put in so much effort at such an enormous cost just for me to be able to find somebody to date. And so it ended up, just getting into relationships that weren't necessarily a relationship that I would be excited to be in, just out of convenience and out of compliance, trying to be compliant with prophetic counsel. That you have to, probably not so much these days, which I'm very excited for Black people who are coming into the church, that is not so much enforced anymore. But when I was coming up in the church, it was constant refrain, constant counsel to marry, find somebody within your race, go out and convert somebody. I mean, I've already served
Yeah.
the mission. I paid my dues. All of this added burden is just so exorbitant for just an average person. So yeah, for that reason, I mean, I suppose as we've shown, RFM, as you've shown in the slides, I could have just not paid attention to that counsel and just gone ahead and I did date and fell in love with lovely white girls. I could have just married, but that refrain, that counsel was always at the back of my mind. Yeah.
This is so tragic, so awful. Do you remember the sound of my voice when we were talking on the phone after I got back to my apartment and I realized what it was that you were saying? And I think it's because you were being gentle about saying it that I didn't, and I also wasn't being that quick on the update, but that you're actually saying that. It's awful.
Yeah.
What do you think about this story, Summur?
I think it's so sad. It's just so tragic because it's hard enough to find someone that you want to spend the rest of your life with. That's hard enough. But then to put barriers up in that way, to say, okay, this is someone within my race, but they're not of the faith. And
Mhm.
there's somebody here that's of the faith, but they're not within my. It's very sad because you start to not look at what would make a marriage work. What is the compatibility? Um, and that's just sad. And Charles, you mentioned it earlier with, you would think that it begs the question that, well, then if you marry within your race, then you should have this amazing marriage or within the faith. But people don't. And I do think it's also because there are not the right questions being asked. The only question that's being asked in your case was, is she within your race and is she a
Right.
member? And a
That's
lot
right.
of people, that's the only thing that they care about, right? Is
Yep.
are you faithful and did you serve a mission? Or,
Right.
you know, are you still sexually pure? The questions are not being asked that need to be asked to make marriage what marriage should be. And it's heartbreaking to hear that counsel that was given altered your life dramatically, but now it's no longer even given. I
Yeah.
mean, if it was still given, you could at least take solace that other people are in the same boat as you. But
Right.
it's not even given anymore, and it's not even thought of anymore. And so you really are looking back now and saying, wait, what was that? What was my life then?
Right.
It's sad.
And, and no apology offered for
No apology.
having taught that for all of those years, right? Counseling bishops, as we've read in the manual, as we've seen in the slides, right, to discourage this. A young college student shows up and, they are dating somebody in the ward, and the bishop immediately steps in and discourages the relationship. Now, it's almost, it is forgotten. All of this has been disavowed. And if you look up disavow, the word meaning disavow means not taking responsibility. The church does not want to take responsibility for the myriad number of lives that have been disrupted because of this, um, because of that counsel.
Well, and you have to take into account that from the founding, pretty much, there's been this curse of Cain.
Mhm.
When the ban was lifted, they never referenced, they never talked about that. They didn't say this was a mistake. There was no curse. There was never an acknowledgement of that. So even if the ban was lifted, there's still this understanding that this was the reason why. There is a curse. So members within the church are going to continue to propagate that
Right.
understanding and that explanation. I know for me, my faith crisis, or whatever you want to call it, began with reading the Blacks in the Priesthood LDS Topics essay. When I
Mhm.
read that, that was the beginning for me, where I said, wait, I was never taught any of these things. I didn't know that there was someone called Elijah Abel. I'd never even heard of someone that had the priesthood, and to think that someone had it and then have it taken away. So they're people's lives. These are people's lives that are being affected. And unfortunately, because there's no acknowledgement, because the church leadership cannot say this was a mistake on our part, they throw it on the members, and it's not taken, it's never taken away. And so that's what you experienced, Charles, was members, bishops, not just in the manual, but hearing it from their grandparents and from their great grandparents that this is a literal curse. That is going to continue through the line. And it's just really sad. I mean, there's still traces of it within the church. It hasn't been fully eradicated because the church has not come out and said, this was a mistake, this was not God. They say that it was God. We just don't know why God said it. Now that's what the essence said.
That is the official president.
I
I was going to say that's the official position of the now current president of the church, President Oaks, is that God did the ban, and we just don't know why.
We just don't know why. And anything that was said before was not church doctrine. That no church leaders said it was because Black people were not faithful in the pre-existence, which RFM put up a slide. That is not true. So if anybody wants to take the time to read Blacks in the Priesthood, the LDS, the official side of the church, they can do that. But it's very sad because there's a lot of gaslighting. There's a lot of, we don't know where this came from. We don't know why people think this. We don't know why God did this, but we just are happy that he took it away. But you see someone like you, Charles, that they devoted their life to following prophetic counsel. I wasn't good at following prophetic counsel. Obviously, I decided to go to college, and I had an interracial marriage, and so I did not listen. But that's my personality, is not to listen. You listened, and then now you're here looking back, and there is no acknowledgement. There's not even a, we got it wrong. For those that listened, we are sorry. Or culturally, it was not conducive for us to go against the grain. But there's nothing.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry for that, for you. That's I can't even imagine.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, no, it's it is disturbing, the height and the depth and amount of resources the church spends in hiding the truth. I can tell you, in my native language, the translation of the Book of Mormon, that's 2 Nephi 5:21 through 25, is excised. I'm talking in my very native tongue that I speak. That those verses are removed.
Wow.
Okay, let's back up. Okay, your native tongue, is it not?
In my native language.
And what's your native language?
It's called Efik. You will find the Book of Mormon is translated into that language, EFIK.
All right, now you're talking about 2 Nephi 5.
2 Nephi 5.
What passage are you referring to?
20, I believe 21. It stops, I think, the last I checked, thus far the translation or the interpretation into that language ends in verse 20 or 19. I have to go back and look.
I am looking it up right now. You just go ahead.
It's been excised from the scripture. So all of that to say that not only was I not informed, I remember asking the missionary couple.
Wait a second. Okay, I'm so sorry. I had thought you were talking about the one that says that we're all of the same blood.
No. So this is the one that said the Lord causes skin of blackness to come upon them, that they may not be.
Can I read this? Since I have it in front of me, it says, and he had caused the cursing to come upon them.
Mm-hmm.
Yea, even a sore cursing because of their iniquity. So this is verse 21. This is what you say has been excised in your native version of the Book of Mormon that they publish and distribute over for members in Africa to read, or at least in
Yep.
that tongue. I'm guessing it might be in other languages in
Oh
Africa.
yeah, I
as
think
well.
there are several other languages that does not appear. Those verses
Okay,
do not
let me
appear.
read this, all right? And let me, so everybody understands this is being published by the church, and they're taking out verses of the Book of Mormon because they don't want new or old, I guess, Black members of the church in Africa to know what's actually in the Book of Mormon.
Right.
And he had caused the cursing to come upon them, yea, even a sore cursing because of their iniquity. For behold, they had hardened their hearts against him, that they had become like unto a flint. Wherefore, as they were white and exceedingly fair and delightsome, that they might not be enticing unto my people, the Lord did cause a skin of blackness to come upon them. And thus saith the Lord God, I will cause that they shall be loathsome unto thy people. This is the Lamanites and the Nephites.
Wow.
Say they shall repent of their iniquities. Go ahead, Summur.
Oh no, I just said wow. I know that scripture, to hear that it is that there are groups of people who have never heard that that's shocking. It is shocking because it's a big point of contention, right, within the LDS church.
Yes.
So to hear that there's groups of people out there that are getting the Book of Mormon and they don't even see it. Wow. So when you got it, Charles, you're saying that you never even read that then. It wasn't until you went to LA?
No, yeah, it was not until LA. There is Africans. If you read, I think her name is Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. She published the book Half of the Yellow Sun, I think. She says that she never knew she was Black until she came to America. And what that means is in Africa, pretty much of Africa, you're not distinguished, or you're not described, or you're not, there's no racial differentiation between folks. So you don't consider yourself Black. So a lot of Black people in Africa that read that scripture, it doesn't resonate with them. It doesn't ring as the context of what we understand it here, right? So they might not look at it like that. They might not interpret it that way. But yeah, those verses were all new to me when I arrived in Los Angeles on my mission.
How did you make this discovery? So you said it was all new to you when you arrived on your mission. How did you find out that this is here in the English Book of Mormon, but not in your native?
Yeah. Excuse me. So there was a podcast that I listened to. One of I don't remember if he was a missionary. Once the church started interpreting Book of Mormon into different languages. For one, Nigeria was an English colony, so you read most of the literature, schools, and what have you is in English, right? So they didn't have a copy of the Book of Mormon back then in my native language. This is all sort of post 95, I want to say. So between 95 and 2000 is when these translations were going on. And so there was a podcast that I listened to where somebody did a presentation and pulled up the languages for which Book of Mormon has been translated into and the verses that are missing. And I happened to grab a screenshot. I can't pull it off right now just because it's buried in a whole bunch of folders. But I pulled up the translation, those verses in my language, and those verses are missing.
So even though I wouldn't be able to read it, I'd be able to see that the number of verses.
Yes, right.
Is
you will
shorter.
see. You will see. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Amazing to me. Okay, I'm glad that you brought this up.
Yeah, and it's something I just found out. Yeah, in the last couple of years, at least in the last year, is when I finally found this out, that those verses are missing.
What did that make you think?
It just validates. I think, RFM, you have a quote. if you accuse us of hiding things, we will hide you. the extent that the church goes in hiding things, not just the Cain curse doctrine, not just the historicity of the founding of the church, but this priesthood ban, what was done to Jane Manning James. Like you actively, it was only after being compelled that the church published the gospel topic essays. And even then, so much of what is presented in the gospel topic essays are washed, rinsed several times. It's not really, comprehensive history and narration of what happened. So it just validates to me so much is being hidden from members, and especially the council that do not trust people who don't believe and only read something or things that are approved by the church makes it impossible for people who want to stay active to go out there and seek out information. So much is hidden, and it validates that for me, and it continuously leaves a very bad taste. And if I could share something personal, so for a very long time I've had, as I'm struggling with this issue of my belonging in the church, some horrible dreams, constantly waking up in cold sweat and as I'm going into therapy, as I've gone into therapy, come to find out this is just my body trying to protect itself from this trauma, from this religious trauma. Once I decided that I no longer fitted in the church and it just has destroyed my spirit, those horrible dreams just disappeared.
Wow.
So it's taken me a long time to just finally come to a resolution, to come to an understanding and acceptance that the church is not a place for me. It's not a healthy place emotionally, psychologically, spiritually. As much as I have given to it and tried to fit in and find my place in it, it's just not a healthy emotional, psychological place for me. It was until after I let it go that my dreams became vivid and in color. Prior to that, it's all been dark and just anguishing. So yeah, I wish that the church was honest and truthful and transparent. Finding out the Cain curse doctrine and all of the underlying supporting prophetic pronouncements from Bruce R. McConkie, George Buchanan, Joseph Fielding Smith, all of them, Marky Peterson, Randy Bott. I mean, you can you can go down the line, and I've kept a full folder of all of these statements that they've made, and just figure out how horrible this doctrine was. And finding that out was such a tremendous blow to I reacted viscerally. I remember going to my mission president's office and said, please help me understand this, because this doesn't make sense. Why should I find this out from a non-member? How come the church could not trust me? I've given you my life and my resources and my time and my heart. Why could you not be honest? And he said, Elder Charles, he called me by my last name, if I can lift this burden from you, I would. I'm like, that doesn't help me. I remember a general authority coming to visit the mission during zone conference, and I just said, I'm struggling with this. Can you just help me make sense? He's like, well, don't throw the baby out with the bath water. What does that even mean? Yeah. I'm asking some very challenging help. Explain to me, because in my head, it doesn't make sense. I've given this church my heart. I'm out here on my mission, and I'm out here in LA teaching Black folks, and this question comes up. I'm being laughed at for belonging to this church. Help me defend you. Help me defend your doctrine and your church. Nobody wanted to talk about this. It's a lot easier now. You would find bishops who maybe have educated themselves on the issue, and presidents and stake presidents and mission presidents, and they can approach it and they can talk about it. But back then, there was no resources, no help, no avenue to reconcile this betrayal.
It's interesting because when my parents joined the church, my dad said he was not taught about the ban at all. Obviously, that wasn't in any of the discussions. And he said, I think the night before or 2 days before they were supposed to get baptized, he heard about it. And he was struggling, he didn't know. And he said that the stake president came over and said, it's interesting. The Lord gives you enough to take the first step, and then he asks you to take the next step in faith. And that was enough for my dad. He said he prayed about it. He felt great. Hearing your story, and then we're going to listen to Elder Johnson's as well. There never really is a direct answer. It's always have faith. Don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. It's always these overreaching thoughts instead of just saying, this happened. We don't know why. It's not right, but X, Y, and Z. But there is no response. So it's just interesting. Every time I hear somebody say that they asked this question, it's never answered. It's always, well, we don't know. God's thoughts are higher than our thoughts, but the church is true.
Right.
Yes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip a few slides.
Mhm.
Thanks for sharing that with us, Charles.
Thank you.
I'm going to skip a few slides. I want to get right to Elder Johnson's quote now. Because
And I
it's
just
because
wanna
of Elder
say-
Johnson that I thought of you,
Yeah.
because he had the same experience that you had in relation to not learning anything about the priesthood ban and temple ban until after he was on his mission.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And he's
What a
not going to
blessing.
say
Yeah.
exactly how it happened, but I'm going to pretty much guarantee you it wasn't from his companion or the mission president.
Right. We know
It's
that.
probably a similar circumstance to yours, Charles, where you're in a discussion, you're teaching, I guess, where you were teaching, right?
Mhm. Yeah. We were teaching
And
an
you're teaching some black people or black family or a black guy, and they say to you, why are you even a missionary for these people?
That's right. That's exactly right. That was exactly the question that they asked. And I'm, innocently asked, well, why do you ask? What do you mean? And they said, well, did you not know about your church? And this is when they're telling me your church didn't allow your kind. And I think church leadership assumes that non-members are unaware of the facts, right? And so, they might miss a couple of things here or there. But yeah, they do know. They do know that the doctrine was that black people were cursed, that
Yep.
we inherited the Cain curse. That is out there.
And then you
And
turn to your companion completely dumbfounded
Yeah.
for help.
I
And what
just
did he do?
crestfallen. I'm not even sure which
My
companion I had at the
recollection, and
time.
my recollection is not what he used to be, but from when you told me several years ago that he just kind of looked at you and shrugged.
Oh yeah. Oh sure. Yeah. I mean, both. I'm not even sure that my companion. I think within family circles and conversation, they might just have assumed, okay, we know that this is what it is. But to have this come out in public, in the presence of an investigator for this companion was just. He's like, well, there's nothing we can say or do now that will bring this family into the church. And so he didn't have an answer either. I don't even think they had the skills to. I love for how Elder Peter Johnson, how it worked out for him that he turned to his companion and the companion comforted him and gave him some validation. I don't even know if they validated.
He just said, I love you.
He just said,
I love you.
Yeah.
That doesn't explain. I appreciate that, but it doesn't explain the intellectual, trauma that you need to process through, right? So my companion couldn't even do that. My mission president couldn't do that. His wife couldn't do that. General authorities couldn't do that. Not a single one, more than my mission president at the time, who was a mental health professional, should have known how devastating this was for me. The only thing that he could say was, I wish I could lift this load from you. I'm like, I can manage the load. Just help me understand why, right? I did stay and finish the mission, even though I found this out early on. But adding tremendous, it induced anxiety, depression. Coming back, I wonder now how I finished college, because this thing carried me through. It dwelled, hung on my back that entire time through college.
I think we got it ready so we can play this clip from Elder Johnson, which is the one that made me think immediately of you. And now that we know your story, it will be obvious, I think, to everybody why it was that I thought of you when I heard this. So let me see if I can get this up on the screen. Here we go. This is Elder Peter M. Johnson. This is a little bit less than a 3-minute clip.
I have felt as if I did not belong. I was baptized and confirmed a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints when I was 19 years old. 1 year later, I accepted a call to serve as a full-time missionary, but there was much I had not yet learned about church history. Early in my missionary service, I learned that there was a period that those of Black African descent were not allowed to enjoy all of the blessings of worshiping in the house of the Lord. Learning this for the first time brought feelings of anger, confusion, doubt, and fear. These feelings were so intense that my ability to recognize the Holy Ghost was lost for a season. Fortunately, I had a wonderful missionary companion, Kevin Vick, who ministered to me with love, patience, and kindness. Each night, as he witnessed my feelings of doubt and uncertainty, he would simply say to the younger Elder Johnson, "I love you." After about 2 weeks, I allowed myself to feel of Kevin's love. I gained the courage to pray to Heavenly Father in the name of Jesus Christ. And as I prayed, I was drawn to section 6 of the Doctrine and Covenants, verses 21 to 24, which states, "Behold, I am Jesus Christ, the Son of God. I am the light which shineth in darkness. Cast your mind upon the night that you cried unto me in your heart, that you might know concerning the truth of these things. Did I not speak peace to your mind concerning the matter? What greater witness can you have than from God?" As I read, I remembered. I remembered the day that I had fasted and prayed to know that the Book of Mormon is the Word of God, and that Joseph Smith is the prophet of the restoration. I remember covenants made in the house of the Lord that connect me to Jesus Christ in such a personal and intimate way. I felt of the Savior's love, his mercy, and of his assurance that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is his kingdom upon the earth and is necessary to prepare us for his second coming. Because I remembered, I again was able to recognize the Holy Ghost and to understand more fully that Jesus is the Christ and I am his disciple. At times, we will have unanswered questions and feelings of being unimportant, discouraged, alone, and unseen. However, my friends, we must press forward with faith in Jesus Christ and remember his words. "Let not your heart be troubled. In the world ye shall have tribulations, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world." I am a witness to this reality and of the Savior's promise.
So in a 10-minute conference talk, Elder Johnson spends almost 3 full minutes talking about this experience that he had, which I've never heard in general conference, an experience like this being related. So I certainly want to give him credit for relating the experience.
Yeah.
And I let it go for the full length because I wanted to give him the opportunity on this show to explain, as much as he did in general conference, how it was that he dealt with this issue and why it is that now he's a general authority, right? So, Charles, what did you think when you were listening to this?
Yeah, I appreciate the validation. I appreciate him sharing his story. I think that they are just within my own circle of friends and acquaintances, Black and African American members who have struggled with this issue that has never before Elder Johnson's articulation and sharing the story at General Conference, that have never been recognized. That story, that experience has never been validated.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of us that are walking around just trying to cope and deal and manage with the the surprise, the betrayal of finding out this story. I wish that he had, I don't know if General Conference is the avenue to do that, that Elder Johnson had gone into, and he talks about what triggered or what caused the anger, but it seems like there's more to that story, as well as also recognizing that there are others of his kind that have struggled with this issue. And perhaps, this might be a positive thing where hopefully the church will pick this up and provide resources for people who have struggled with this issue. I don't think that will be the case, but it would be good. It just seems like he could have talked more about it. The why, the how he resolved it. Has it been a constant struggle since then, or was it resolved one time? I mean, has he found an intellectual response and answer, or is it just we love you, leave it at that, right? Which I sense might be the case.
Can I suggest, Charles, that because he's talking about it still and in general conference and in a way that shows emotion and connection to the experience, that he's not over it yet?
I would agree. Yeah.
What do you think about this, Summur?
So earlier we were talking about, is it a positive thing to see so many Black speakers or representation? And I feel as though this to me is more representation than just seeing somebody like Elder Corbett who goes up and says, don't be an activist, right? For me, this story helps so many more members of the church who are Black, African descent, than just seeing somebody up there, because he spoke to the trauma that a lot of members feel when they hear something they've never heard before, when they hear that they don't have a place in a space where they were told they have a place. So I personally really appreciated this story. Um, I am one of those people who I never judge anybody else's walk when it comes to their faith and what they have to do to either leave the faith or stay within the faith. That's why I appreciate so much hearing Charles's story, because this is literally a parallel of two stories. And one person was able to, the way that Elder Johnson says it is, I felt love and I was able to pray and feel better about this, and have that cognitive dissonance of, I don't really need to hear the answer. I'm able to move forward. Whereas with Charles, he's being very open about, no, I prayed about it and everything, and my journey was not the same. So I give so much credit to Elder Johnson for being able to speak to something that in previous conferences just was glossed over. Nobody wants to talk about what it feels like to hear that there was a curse and your lineage is not respected and loved. So I really, I don't know, that spoke to me, that he spoke so passionately about that instance in his life. But there is also a part of me that has a lot of disdain for the leadership that continues to put people like him and Charles out in the world unprepared and saying, we want you to represent this group of people within our church, without telling them what the history is. A 20-year-old should never be out in the world, 21, 22, and explain racist history that they have no part in. And so that bothers me. It bothers me that at 20 years old, Elder Johnson had to be out here. He had to search within himself. He had to search within the scriptures. He had to go through all of this mental gymnastics and spiritual gymnastics to get to a place that the church never should have put him in. And I don't know if that makes sense, what I'm saying, but that angers me. It bothers me that the church leadership is not taking accountability and acknowledging enough to prepare someone like Charles and like Elder Johnson before they even get to the point where a investigator has to tell them something they should have learned in the MTC.
That's right. That's right.
Or even in the missionary discussions before they were baptized.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that would have been nice
Yeah.
too, but
I mean, I could conceive of a special unit to be used for when you're teaching Black investigators, or
absolutely.
maybe we should just put it in there for everybody, for crying out loud.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Before baptism, even if you don't want it to be part of the core discussions, before baptism, let's have a discussion about the LDS essays. Let's talk about the Book of
Mhm.
Abraham. Let's talk about Blacks in the priesthood. Let's talk about polygamy. I mean, but then, the conversion rate would be a lot less. So I don't see that happening anytime soon.
It would be less than zero,
It'd be less.
is what it would be. I had three thoughts about what it was that Peter Johnson said and how he said it. Because even though I'm hearing what he says and I'm hearing his distress and immediately thinking of Charles and his distress in the similar situation, I did notice that his framing is that the church is not responsible. He
Right.
tries to frame it. He's very much, even though he went through this and is still living with it, he's still trying to defend the church.
Right.
And this is what he does. Let me remove this from the screen, put this back up. These are three quotes from what he said. I had not learned about church history, which I interpret as meaning, well, yeah, you could say that, and that would be true, but the church did not tell you about the
Exactly.
priesthood and temple man
That's right.
because they kept it hidden
Right.
from you. And he says this as I had not learned about church history. He's doing the typical Mormon thing, which we're taught to do as Mormons, which is the fault is mine,
Yes.
not the church, who's really the culprit. Number two, he said there was a period, as in there was a period of time. There's a period during which, right? It's 150. Hang on a second here. It's 146. I had it before. 1852, 1978, 156 years. 126 years. That's it.
Yeah,
It's over a
126.
century, damn it.
Yeah.
So that's quite a
126.
period of time. So when you say there was a period, when you're talking about what was really 126 years, I think that's done to diminish the time period involved.
Yeah.
With a church that's only been in existence for what, 200?
200. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been for more than half of the church's existence. Good point,
Right.
Summur. Yes. Yes. And number three, he said that Black people were not allowed to enjoy all the blessings of worshiping in the house of the Lord.
I picked up on that too.
And I was disappointed in this. I was trying to think last night, what is it that he's doing? Because he's obviously giving a false impression, at least to me.
Yeah.
And I think that what he's doing is he's taking advantage of this kind of ambiguity in the English language, which abounds in ambiguities. But when we say the words, okay, to enjoy all the blessings of worshiping in the house of the Lord, all the blessings of the temple, let's just put it that way, okay? When we hear something like that, whether it's about the temple or something else, what we understand in the English language is, yes, you can't do all, but you can do some.
Right.
That's what it means, okay? That's how we understand it. But if you were to look at it without that understanding and just look at the words in a very literal sense, which I think he's doing, we were not allowed to enjoy all the blessings of the temple means literally any of the blessings of the temple.
Right.
Well,
That's how he's using it.
Technically, this is very disingenuous, but technically Jane Manning James did enjoy some blessing by being sealed to the prophet as a servant.
But she didn't worship. She didn't get to worship, though.
She didn't get to worship.
She wasn't worshiping in the house of the Lord, so those blessings.
True. That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
I was trying to give them the benefit of the doubt there to say that, at least they were being sealed as servants and slaves, but that's not worshiping.
Yeah, I think he's trying to give the incorrect impression. That's why I pressed both of you earlier on the issue of, I'm right, am I not, that Black people could not even go in the temple at all.
Yeah, no.
For 126 years. So there was no even small part of worshiping in the temple, blessings coming to Black people for 126 years that would allow him to say this and make it true.
And as a Black woman, I could not be sealed. right? So it's not just a priesthood. It's there's no exaltation.
Yes. And so he's defending the church to the point where he says we were not allowed to enjoy all the blessings of the temple. Instead of what I think would be the accurate, we were not allowed to enjoy any of the blessings of the temple.
Right.
So, of course, he's a GA. He didn't get to become a GA by being critical of the church. And so he's couching this, which I think is great that he's telling the story. And I think it does tell a lot if we read between the lines.
Right.
But he's couching it in such a way as to take the responsibility on himself and make the church look as good as it possibly can in a very bad situation.
Yeah.
So let's see what's next. I know what we're going to have to do next because we've got half an hour. We're going to have to go to Elder Godoy. Elder Godoy reveals how heartless the Mormon church is. He's in the area presidency in Africa, and he tells 8 stories about the church in Africa. We are only going to have time for the first 3, and that's okay because they kind of get duplicative after a while.
Yeah.
But mainly what he's trying to show are 2 things. The first thing he's trying to show is how much the church is growing in Africa. And the fact that the church is growing so much in Africa leads to problems for the African saints, usually with having enough buildings or adequate buildings to meet in or whatever. And that they're just wonderful people and they're just smiling. They're grateful. This is one of his things that he says over and over: smiling faces and grateful hearts. Right. That's his coda at the end of each of his stories to describe the black saints who are enduring less than reasonable or adequate facilities and situations with the church in Africa. Okay, now he tells these first 3 stories, but he goes a little bit beyond that. I'm not going to go to all 8. We won't have time. These are the first 3. These are the worst. It culminates. It's like it crescendos into what I think is the worst story, which is number 3. So we don't have to go to the others. This will represent the others. Let me see if I can take this down from here. I have to take this from the screen. Put it up over here. Okay. Now let me see here. Go to that. Yes. 3 stories from Africa. And is it up there? It is. Fantastic. Yes. So see if you could hear the 3 stories okay.
Okay. They find joy despite their challenges. They have learned that our relationship with the Savior enables us to approach difficulties with smiling faces and grateful hearts. Let me share some of my experiences with these faithful saints who illustrate this principle, starting with Mozambique. A few months ago, I presided over a stake conference for a 1-year-old stake that already had 10 units. More than 2,000 people filled the small chapel and 3 tents that were set outside. The stake president is 31 years old. His wife, 26, and they have 2 small children. And he leads this growing and challenging stake with no complaints, only a smiling face and a grateful heart.
Okay, so there's the first story. I'm going to go ahead and pause it. It's easy to find out where the story's over because he ends with the same expression each time. It gets annoying after a while. So that's not a big deal, really, is it? I mean, we've got a young stake president and his wife. We've got a massive amount of people in his stake. So obviously he's working night and day twice as hard as a regular stake president would have to. And his point is, yeah, he's busy. He's inundated. He has no time for his family, obviously. I presume he's working a job as well. And yeah, it's not what can the church do to help him? Like, split the damn stake, for crying out loud. How hard is that to do? And it's just using him as an example of a suffering saint that all should emulate. Honestly, I'm going to get your opinions here. This is the least problematic story, I think. But what he's doing throughout, this is the other thing, is he's using the black saints and the less than adequate conditions under which they meet as it's an illustration for everybody else. It's like when my mom used to tell me, when I'm not eating my broccoli at dinner, there's starving kids in China. I remember she would say that. there are kids starving in China. You need to eat your broccoli. And I'd say, well, give them my broccoli, would you please? Because that'll be a win-win. But it's holding up a group of people that are suffering and saying that you should be more happy with your lot because you're not them.
Right.
Right. If they can have these grateful hearts and these smiling faces under those circumstances, and you're under better circumstances,
And you should,
then what right do you have to complain? That's what I'm trying to get at. What do you think, Summur?
That's exactly what I got from it, was this, they're so humble and look at what they go through, and we'll keep going with the stories. But that's definitely the chain of thought is, they don't have much, you have more. So you should be grateful and smiling through all the tribulations you go through, because look at what they're going through.
Charles?
Yeah, I agree. This resonates. This sounds to me very exploitative, right? And I think we would probably see that as the rest of the stories are shared. He's trying to make the rest of the world members, so the rest of the world feel guilty if they're not showing up to church, if they're not grateful for the many blessings. If you live in the West, the many blessings that they have. Just look at these poor Africans who are joyful, smiling faces and grateful hearts with what little they have. There's a story on BBC. It's a church called Shakahola. BBC did a documentary. This prophet, supposed prophet, this was just 2023, persuaded 429 of his congregants to fast until they died. So this is the water that the church is swimming in. When other religions are this extreme, and you come in as this church, LDS church, and you're offering minimal remedy or options for what life looks like for a lot of these Africans, why would they not join, right? And so this is why I'm saying that instead of the church investing in these African converts, 1 year, 10 units, or one stake, 10 units, you would think that at this rate, they would be building church buildings, providing classrooms, really investing in these converts in this sense, because they're looking for a better life, versus the alternative of Shakahola, where their prophet is going to abuse the trust that these members are giving. This is the contrast, right? This is the contrast. I mean, we can look up Shakahola. It is really a sad, tragic story.
They make the Mormons look good.
That's right. That's the point I'm trying to make, is they make Mormons look good, regardless of however minimal investment that the church is making with all of its vast wealth. Yeah.
So he goes from this story. Now he's going to tell the second story in the same clip, and it is about the patriarch of the stake. Because you can imagine if the stake president's having trouble, the patriarch is going to be having trouble too, because he's going to be having double the number of people to do patriarchal blessings for. And with a host of converts, I mean, it's got to be over 50% are converts in the membership over there, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know if that ups the number of patriarchal blessings, but the patriarch has problems, not just with the number of blessings, but also with his wife who has failing health. And here's the story, and I want to get your take on what it is that Elder Godoy has to say about this. Let's see. Hang on a second here.
Zambia. On the way to the Sunday meeting,
hang on a second.
the stake president and I
That's
saw a
the whole
couple
story.
walking along the road with a baby and two small children. We stopped to offer them a ride. They were surprised and delighted. When I asked how far they needed to walk to the chapel, the father replied that it could take 45 minutes to an hour, depending on the children's pace. They faced this journey back and forth every Sunday with no complaints, only smiling faces and grateful hearts.
So that was the fourth story. I went ahead and let it play because I knew what it was going to be about. And it's just like, okay, so why not get some kind of transportation service going for the saints of the church? I mean, I'm not that smart, but that's the idea that occurs to me. Why do you have members with children walking 45 minutes to an hour to church and from church, and however many times they have to do that, through the week? My goodness, just get some kind of a ride share. Go
Something.
and get the church that provides some kind of vehicle for that. What do you think?
I think the church doesn't have enough money to help them.
That's what it is.
They're budgeting right now. That's what my initial thought was, especially when he said children. This talk really bothered me. And I think when you're outside of it, you see it in a completely different light, because no one should be walking 45 minutes to church if they don't have to be walking 45 minutes to church. And to say it depends on the pace of the children, I don't know how he can be there, see the opulence of Salt Lake, and go to this country and not say, guys, we've got to figure something out when he goes back to Salt Lake. I don't know that how you can have that disconnect. But yeah, Charles, what do you think of that? It's frustrating.
I'm a little rusty with my Old Testament, but I think I recall a story of Pharaoh continuously adding burden onto the people. Right?
Yeah.
If I remember, the church has become exactly that, right? Where it delights in the suffering and the sacrifices of its members, especially in these countries that he is the example that he is giving the struggling members, because for some reason the church feels like the more they struggle, the more it increases their faith, right? Rather than lightening their load, helping them get to church on time, enjoy the experience, the burden of walking 45 minutes to an hour to church, including little children. What does the church, the Bible say about offending little children, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't think this is a flex that he thinks it is from an outside perspective. It's not. The church should be doing this is the stone that was discarded becoming the chief cornerstone. I'm rusty with my scriptures now, right? Africa ultimately will probably become the anchor for the church at the rate it's growing. Not because those members believe that the church is true, but rather they see the church as perhaps an avenue for better standard of living, for better life.
Yeah.
Right. And so the church should be doing everything to help these people grow spiritually, physically, in their safety net to provide them opportunities, instead of getting up there and talking about the sacrifices that these saints are making.
Yeah.
Very good. So let me see if I can get this back up to the 3 stories from Africa and get past this first story. Let's see how this goes.
They find joy. Let me share some of my experiences with these faithful saints who illustrate this. Already had 10 units, more outside. The stake president is 31 years old. His wife, 26, and they have 2 small children. And he leads this growing and challenging stake with no complaints, only a smiling face and a grateful heart.
Number 2.
In an interview with the patriarch, I learned that his wife was seriously ill, and he struggled to provide for her care. After addressing the issue with the stake president, we gave her a priesthood blessing. I inquired of the patriarch how many patriarchal blessings he gives on average. 8 to 10, he said. I replied, per month? And he said, per week. I counsel him that doing that many per weekend was not wise. Elder Godoy, he said, they keep coming every week, including new members and many youth. And again, no complaints, only a smiling face and a grateful heart. After the Sunday evening session of state conference, on my way to the hotel, I noticed.
That was the end of the second story. Does anybody want to comment about that? Obviously, the state patriarch has the same problem the state president has. Too much work to do because the stake is too big. But then he goes on to the wife, right? So the state patriarch has a wife who's ailing. He has to care for his wife. So what do they do for the wife? What do they do for the patriarch? What does the church do to help?
Right.
Tell his story in conference.
Right.
Yeah, and give her a blessing, which obviously didn't work. Otherwise, we would have heard about it.
Yeah.
That's all they did to help this patriarch. They didn't, call another patriarch, for crying out loud.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. In the absence of social safety net, a lot of Africans rely on miracles. They're coming, what did he say, 7 to 10 per week? I don't remember the number. A lot of them are coming because they want remedy, they want hope, they're hoping that these blessings will alleviate some of the suffering.
Yeah.
Whatever those may be for them, right? So obviously they're not getting that. The society that they live in isn't providing that. They're looking to the church for that. The church isn't offering that. But we can talk about it in conference. Look at how many people are coming for blessings per week.
The only thing on the prior story that underscored it more about the problem with the members and the families walking 45 minutes to an hour to church and back home again is the fact he tells it in the context of that this is what he saw as he was driving to church.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
He didn't get out and walk with them, right?
No, he didn't.
There is no journey on the road to Damascus here.
I'm glad he said, hey, you want to ride? I think that was the right thing to do. But why does this have to be an exception?
Yeah.
It is amazing. And the thing is, he wasn't even driving. His driver was driving.
Driving. Yeah.
Right.
He was in the back. And the reason that I think this is true is because this final story that we're going to cover, which I think is the worst of the bunch, that's how he starts. He says it was after state conference. Just had this wonderful state conference. He says Sunday evening. I think he might have meant Saturday evening because the next morning he's in church looking at the smiling faces. It was this thing that he described, this story he described about at night when he is being driven along the streets of the town and his driver points out, or he asks his driver a question about why are all these people out at the market so late at night?
Yeah.
So it's probably after 9 o'clock. I think that's usually when the Saturday evening session of state conference gets over. I don't know how long he had to stay after that for whatever, but it's kind of late. And there's all these people at the market. He asked him a question. I'll let him tell the story, and I want to get your take on this. And let's see if we can start this up where I left off. You see, that was the problem. I'll tell you what the problem is. The problem is that the go button is perilously close to the switch slide button. In fact, it's overlaid on top of it. So we're gonna find this here. This is the 3 stories from Africa.
They find hotel. I noticed people buying food. Only a smiling face and a grateful heart. After the Sunday evening session of state conference, on my way to the hotel, I noticed people buying food along the road late at night. I asked my driver why they are doing it when it is so dark rather than during the day. He responded that they were working during the day to have the money to do it later. Oh, they were working today to eat tomorrow, I said. But he corrected me. No, they were working during the day to eat tonight. I had hoped our members might be in a better situation, but he confirmed that many faced similar challenges in that part of the country. The next morning, during our Sunday session, and newly aware of their circumstances, I was even more moved by their smiling faces. and grateful hearts. Zen.
Yeah.
What do you think of that story, Charles?
With all of the resources that the church has, it breaks my heart that he could be sharing this story. It wouldn't be it make a difference if the narrative was, and maybe they're doing this and he's not sharing it. I don't know. That we came into this country and we're seeing suffering and we're creating schools for the children. We're training. After all, if they give them leadership training for their careers, this is the local population. It's likely to also transfer. They're giving them leadership training in church. It's likely to transfer into their professional opportunities, that they're doing these kinds of things. But that he's sharing a story about this family is working, parents working during the day so they can buy groceries for the night. It's just one day. They have to repeat that the following day and the day after that. And they're walking. In the context of the whole narrative, some of them are walking 45 minutes on Sunday, that they could be resting with their families to go to church, right? Yeah.
Summur?
My first thought was that these are also people they're still asking to tithe.
Yeah.
You're seeing that they have to work to eat that night, and you still are able to say tithe. That's it's hard. It's very difficult to know what you know and then see talks like this.
He seemed at one point to be distraught himself when his driver, by the way, it makes it so bad. It's like, oh, driver, could you tell me what those people are doing buying food by the side of the road so late at night? It's a bad image I get. But
Yeah.
he does seem to be distraught at one point where his driver responds, who's obviously lives there and he knows what's up. He says, I had hoped our members would be in a better situation than that. But I found out that a lot of our members were. And he cries. It's almost as, I mean, he feels the human impulse to do something, but the church isn't doing anything to help them. Believe me, Charles, if the church were doing anything to help them, they would be telling you.
Yeah.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
I have heard, by the way, though I don't know it for certain, that the policy of the church is to not do what? Charitable work, help out materially with the saints in Africa. I've heard that is the case. Have either of you heard that?
Yep, I have heard that. I've heard that it is they don't want to turn Africa into a cost center by helping, because then they'll become reliant on the church, right? It'll become a cost instead of profit. Instead of tithing coming in, the church will be spending money.
Wow.
Yep, I have heard that.
You know, I can understand the concern that if you're leading with this helping out, that you might have a lot of people join in the church just because you're helping out.
Right.
Yeah, I understand that's a concern. I don't think it's a concern that Jesus would have, but I understand the concern. But I'm talking about the people who are the members already.
Right.
Does that really translate, that concern translate into we do nothing to help?
Yeah. You and I have a friend. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say the answer is yes. That's what it translates to.
I think you and I have a friend who shared a story about a returned missionary in Africa who couldn't even afford food. I think our mutual friend told a story and reached out to the church and they wouldn't help. So he had gone out, served the mission, came back home. As in a lot of African countries, no jobs. Yeah. Yep. They're not.
So just to make this clear, because I think it's clear enough, but you reminded me of this. You have a great memory, by the way. Either that or I have a horrible memory, or both. But I do recall that story right. A black man from Africa joined the church, went on a mission, gave his all for 2 years, came back home, and then as an active member, returned missionary, was not able to get enough food for nutrition.
Yeah. Yeah. That is the approach of the church. As long as they're coming in and they're joining the church, and we can announce 900,000 new converts, right? That is really, I think, ultimately, the church is using Africa to increase the numbers of converts. That is all. So we can talk about the number of converts instead of not just saving souls, but saving, saving meeting their physical needs. Yeah.
There's an irony that the race that the church discriminated against for 126 years may now be the one that's coming forward to save the church and the membership numbers today.
Right. Yep. I fully think that is what is going to happen. That the red Africans are joining the church. I think that is what will save the continued pretense of growth numbers.
Yeah, you went Zoom talk a little bit there for a second, but I think what you said was to keep up the pretension of this artificial growth that the church is proclaiming.
Yep.
Right.
What will remain to be seen, if that is ever reported, is the number of the active numbers, because members come in. What the church does, comes in and promises priesthood blessings. You go in and you receive priesthood blessings, and you're expecting these blessings to just fall out of heaven, and it doesn't happen. And what is the thing with Africans is, if a spiritual organization doesn't meet their needs, they will just walk away. They won't go through the process of actively resigning from the church, right? So the church will continue to count them until 110 years old, even if they're not active, right? So it keeps the artificially inflated church membership numbers very high, whereas, they've moved on to another congregation. They've moved on to a different, religion altogether, a different faith. But the church will keep counting them because they're not going to, it's already an overhead burden for them to take the time to process resignation paperwork. So, yeah.
So that was the last clip. Time for closing comments, concluding thoughts for a minute or two, because we're coming up on that hard break. Summur, you first.
Yeah.
I wanted to mention with the tithing that I mentioned before, because this is something I didn't know. When you tithe, so they're tithing to the church. When you put tithe on, it goes directly to Salt Lake. If you put fast offering, then it will stay within your ward. So something as small as tithing to your own ward would do wonders for that, for all these churches, but especially the churches we're talking about in Africa. If they are asked to tithe or whatever, and that money stayed in their local ward, they would see so many things. Maybe they could do a ride share or bus service. But what's happening is they're being asked to tithe, and that money's going straight to Salt Lake City. And then the bishop, stake president has to ask for money back, right? And go through that whole thing. So just little things could change so much. But I don't think the church wants that change. They want to have these stories, as Charles was saying earlier, so that they can idolize hardship. So they can turn around and say, this is what's going on. And if they can do it, you can do it. Instead of really helping what Jesus would do and say, what can we do for the least of these? So this conference was very boring for me. I was telling RFM this behind the scenes. It was more boring than any other conference, and I've been watching these conferences for decades now. But these talks, especially Elder Godoy, I just felt as though it was very tone deaf. And I don't know who is behind the scenes saying that this is what the leaders should be telling the members, but it's tone deaf. Given what people are going through right now, no one wants to hear that people are struggling and know that the church could go in, step in, and actually help.
Yes. For those who don't know, $300 billion
$300 billion.
with a B is what the church has in the bank. That's what we're talking about, the resources of the church that they're not expending to help out the African saints.
Right.
Charles, you get the final word.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Summur. Thank you, RFM, for this panel. And it's been really wonderful. Thank you for letting me share my story. I'm looking out 10, 20, 100 years from now. I think as a business, the church is doing its best to benefit from the growth in Africa. If African governments manage the economies well, it is a very rich continent. There is no reason why there should be poverty. It is incredibly rich, especially now with rare earth metal and all of the opportunities that is coming in. So as a business, the church is looking out 50, 100 years. It will do very well in Africa as it grows a member base that ultimately can thrive, be successful, and pay tithing. So even if the rest of the world dwindles in membership and no tithing is coming in, the church will be doing very well. The heartbreaking part for me is that the church is not investing in those Africans now to alleviate some of the suffering. One way or another, I think Africa, the amount of wealth that is being taken out of Africa is enormous. If they can manage their governance and create opportunities and safety net, it would be an amazing continent. It does break my heart that these stories are being shared as one to guilt the rest, guilt the rest of the members. Look at what Africans are suffering and they're still faithful and they're coming to church. Why can't you do better with all of the wealth that you have in the West? But it does break my heart that they will be suffering that the church isn't paying attention to. The other part is not disclosing the true historicity of the church to these African members. They will not probably struggle as I have, but not being honest in the historicity and the doctrine tells me the regard that the church has for those. If I just consider interpersonal relationships, if I'm in a relationship with somebody and I'm not being honest, even if by omission I'm not disclosing things, it shows that I don't value them. I don't regard them as much, right? I look at it that way. That is the way the church is looking at these members. By not disclosing the history of the church, it tells me the value that the church has for those Africans that are coming into the church.
Good point. And by extension, to all the rest of the members too, huh?
That's right. Yeah.
We really do exist for the church. The church is not there for the members. My goodness. Thank you so much, Charles. Thank you, Summur, for coming on the show. We'll let you go. I think we met the time. We're 2 minutes after, but that's better than I expected. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Please hit like. Please hit subscribe. Please leave a comment below. And thanks for watching so much. Thank you both for sharing your experiences. It's been a really, really enlightening for me personally experience listening to both of you. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Arfin. Thank you, Summur.
You bet.
See you next time.
Everybody. What? I'm sorry, Charles?
I said, see you next time.
Absolutely. See you next time. Where? On Radio Free Mormon.
On Radio Free Mormon. That's right.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.